Hello and welcome to another UK Column Live on Friday the 19th of September. I am Malcolm Massey and this is Mike Robinson. How are you, Mike?
I'm very well, thank you.
So Mike, I just had a quick question for you. We were promised this Indian summer heat wave mega explosion of weather. We're not getting it. Is that because too many planes have been deployed, or maybe a little bit of ozone has not been depleted enough? What's happening with that, Mike?
There's a certain irony in it. We've got worse air quality than the Chinese at the moment, and a more communist government than the Chinese at the moment. So
they're pretty jealous.
That's how it works. Then?
Yeah, that's how it works. So big news today, then, Mike. So we had a very important result last night. What's going on?
Well, apparently the UK has been saved, but it's no time for triumphalism. Allegedly, according to the. Well, in fact, just about everybody being quoted by the mainstream media is saying pretty much the same thing. But don't worry, it's not over, because in fact, change doesn't end today, according to Ed Miliband, and he should know because he's received the script, although I'm not quite sure that he actually understands it. But he has received it at least. David Cameron, on the other hand, does understand what he's doing, and what he's doing is committing treason right in front of our eyes, in fact, and here's what he had to say. The people of Scotland have spoken. It's a clear result. They have kept our country of four nations together like millions of other people. I am delighted. He was really sincere when he said that. As I said during the campaign, it would have broken my heart to see our United Kingdom come to an end. And really, he said our United Kingdom, our United Kingdom, our United Kingdom all the way through the speech, as I'm just about to show. He went on to say, so now it's time for our United Kingdom to come together and move forward. A vital part of that will be for a balanced settlement, fair to the people of Scotland, and importantly to everyone in England, Wales and Northern Ireland as well. So already we've got an acknowledgement that there's going to be a settlement. But who was talking about a settlement? We were talking about independence or not independence. But now whether we've got independence or not, we're going to have a settlement. So actually the vote was irrelevant. The referendum was irrelevant because the political agenda moves forward regardless.
Do you think it would have helped if there had been a yes vote to help with the breakup to get us into the European Union, or further within the European Union, or do you think
this isn't about the EU? This is about the Constitution, I believe, and no, it doesn't make any difference because this agenda is moving forward regardless. Makes no difference at all. He went on to say, "I'm a passionate believer in our United Kingdom." He never said who the we is that owns the United Kingdom. Our United Kingdom. I want more than anything that our United Kingdom to stay together, but I'm also a Democrat.
So, a little bit of small print, a little bit of but by the way.
Yes, right, okay. No. He then went on to say, we now have a chance, a great opportunity to change the way the British people are governed and change it for the better. For whom? I would like to ask, for whom?
And the classic, as Brian always says, what are we changing to?
What are we changing to? This is exactly right. He went on to say, it is absolutely right that a new and fair settlement for Scotland should be accompanied by a new and fair settlement that applies to all parts of our United Kingdom. So he is absolutely talking about a settlement, but this settlement hasn't been discussed, publicly at least. Hasn't been discussed in Parliament. Maybe on committees, but not on the floor. Certainly hasn't been reported by the mainstream media.
Well, was there anyway at any time was there a complaint from the Scottish people that they wanted independence before this vote was sort of given to them?
Well, no, it was kind of pushed on them by the Scottish National Party. But of course, people do have the right to govern themselves. My argument here is that of course they were never going to get the right to govern themselves. That the vote was irrelevant. Independence was never on the table. So the right to govern yourselves was not on the table either. This is demonstrating it because they're ploughing ahead regardless with their political agenda, which would have happened no matter what the result of the vote was. Anyway, let's go on with Cameron. He goes on to say, so just as Scotland will vote separately in the European Parliament on their issues of tax, spending and welfare, so too England, as well as Wales and Northern Ireland, should be able to vote on these issues. And all this must take place in tandem with and in the same and at the same pace as the settlement for Scotland. Well, surely Parliament was the place where these things were decided, but now we're devolving this out at a regional level. So it's going out to Northern Ireland, to Wales, to Scotland, and we're left with Parliament. What is the role of Parliament going to be? And of course, the answer is there is going to be no role for Parliament because we are breaking the UK up we're balkanizing it, and we are turning it into European regions.
Do you think Parliament will remain for a good time to sort of help people ease into the new way of being, or do you think there's going to be something that's going to cause for Parliament to be devolved?
Well, they've already discussed the question of whether there would be an election if in May, if the Scottish had voted yes. No matter what you think of whether the voting was rigged or not, the result is no so far. But they were already prepared to contemplate the possibility that there would not be an election in 2015 under certain circumstances. So I don't know the answer to that. But anyway, let's go on with Cameron. I hope that is going to take place on a cross-party basis. I've asked William Hague to draw up these plans. He will set up a cabinet committee right away, and proposals will also be ready to the same timetable. I hope that the Labour Party and other parties will contribute. And he went on to say, it is also important that we have wider civil engagement about to improve governance in our United Kingdom, including how to empower our great cities. And we've talked about this over the last couple of weeks, and we'll say more about. And then he goes on, and we'll say more about this in the coming days. So it's not only going to be the European regional map that we've seen published in numerous places over the last 20 years, but they are literally turning cities back into feudal city-states. But of course, what Cameron's doing is driving forward an agenda to turn the UK into a federal state. Financial Times here reporting that. Well, what does that mean? It means exactly what we've been warning about for years. This is the ultimate aim of the big society, which is to bring centralized control down to a local level. You might call it modern feudalism, you might call it corporate communitarianism, any number of other phrases and mixed metaphors. The bottom line is it's pretty much a fascist agenda. But where is Cameron getting his orders? Well, maybe this gives a clue, because this is exactly what Chatham House is tweeting out this morning. Now the UK must find a fair federal system. And of course, The Guardian, as you would expect, is really sort of pushing this as well, because they're expecting the public to comment on the UK's new political system. And the question has to be asked, does the public have the first clue about our constitution that we have, or what it is that we'd be throwing away? And of course, the answer to that is that they don't. And why do they not? Because they're being constantly told by the likes of this guy that we actually don't have a constitution. This is Professor Conor Gearty, an Irishman, and he's driving British constitutional reform. How does an Irishman do that? What's that about? So the UK, he says, has no constitution, and he goes on to say, rather, it has laws, conventions, practices, activities scattered all over the place that constitutional lawyers then gather together and describe as the UK Constitution. He goes on to say, this is unusual, and he suggests many things that might happen in order to sort the problem out. So he's suggesting that the public should decide what our new constitution should be, and they're saying the Constitution should ask questions like, what should we do about the EU? Well, it's very simple. Our current Constitution tells us what we should do about the EU. It says it quite clearly, the EU should go to hell. Another question he asks is immigration a problem? This isn't a constitutional issue, is it? Do you think immigration is a constitutional issue?
Do I think immigration?
Yes.
No, I don't think immigration is a constitutional.
What to you is the purpose of a constitution?
Is to be basically it's a system to help provide people with the things and the amenities that they need. So it's a system of law to prevent people from having crimes against them. It's a system of government which helps provide people with important things like education and health and that sort of thing.
So it's a set of principles upon which your nation is founded, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Does the House of Lords make sense? Is another question. He said that is a constitutional issue. Do we really want the Prince of Wales to be our king? Okay, that is a constitutional issue. Who are we anyway? So anyway, these are the kind of questions that he thinks the public should decide. Well, okay, you're Irish. I'm not quite sure how that applies. But anyway.
Well, an Irishman condemning an Irishman. Wow. It must be Friday. Sorry.
Yes, indeed. But it's not just the London School of Economics. All the think tanks are coming out and pushing the same sort of thing. So after No, what next, according to the IPPR? And of course, Open Democracy couldn't get away with it. They're demanding a constitutional convention now. And of course, this is George Soros-backed sort of think tank that's pushing agitation out into the communities. But it's not just them that are pushing for constitutional convention now, because Nigel Farage is also calling for that. He wants one immediately. And the problem with this is, in my view, that of course, when you're living in a country which is utterly lawless, as this country is, we're demonstrating that on this programme on a day-to-day basis, the corruption, the lack of rule of law in this country, and the rule of the elite instead, and the divine right of Parliament. You're not in a position to have a rational discussion about what any future constitutional arrangement might be when you've got a Parliament which is operating outside of its authority, outside the rule of law, and is in control of the mainstream media, which provides most people with their news and their understanding of the world. Then it becomes very difficult to get some proper discussion going on what the Constitution should be. So under those circumstances, I argue that, as the British Constitution Group has been saying since it was really set up, we need to reassert the Constitution that we have, the rule of law that we have, get ourselves back on an even playing field, and then discuss how we go into the future from that. But in the meantime, we've got to get ourselves back into a stable situation. That's what this conference is about. And I suggest that everybody makes a serious effort to get there.
Do you know what's really interesting, actually, with what you just described and the kind of questions that they want people to start thinking about in terms of the new constitution? They're quite very specific questions, and you look at the current constitution we have in this country, and it's broad in the sense of it protects your rights and your liberties. It doesn't then go in like the Bill of Rights, or not Bill of Rights, like the Human Rights Act. It doesn't go into like very specifics what your rights is. It simply just defines your inalienable rights. That's it.
Well, that's the key.
Do you see what I mean?
That's the key point.
They want to define it very narrowly, because by doing that, it excludes all the other like fantastic rights and liberties that we have, because you've defined it in 10 points. It's like, well, I have more than 10 rights. I have lots of rights. But if you can define those 10 rights, then the other 90 odd rights are washed away, aren't they?
You're absolutely right, Malcolm. Our constitution is based on two main principles: the principle of liberty and also of unlimited rights, and of course human rights legislation. There's an article about this on the front page of the UK column at the moment. Human rights legislation is based on the idea that you have no rights except for the ones that the elite decides that you have.
Privileges we have.
Indeed, but and in fact they argue that with those rights come responsibilities, and if you don't meet your responsibilities, then you don't have the rights. Whereas the British Constitution is based on the opposite principle, that you have unlimited rights except where it is agreed among people that in fact it would be a bad thing for me to be able to murder you, for example.
When your rights infringe on my rights,
exactly.
Basically, right?
So infringement is the word there, not imposition or slavery. So we're in a very dangerous position. I believe this is really a pretty seminal stage in the future of this country and the world, and we should be grabbing this one issue among many others, but this is one of the most serious issues that we've got to face at the moment, because this is an absolutely core part of the political agenda. And one of the things that Cameron also said in his speech was that because there is cross-party consensus on this issue of constitutional reform and where this country is being taken, that of course the agenda will pass through automatically into the next parliament, no matter who is elected. So this is one of those policy items that will not change after the general election in May.
So it will make the following parties binded.
They are trying to bind the next parliament, indeed.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's remarkable, isn't it? It's almost, if people do go and read, like, you know, the articles we're talking about, the Bill of Rights, Declaration of Rights, the Settlement Act, all these things, the Coronation Oath Act, and you read these things and you look at the current government and you think, you're not doing any of these things. You're not following any of these principles. You know.
As I said, they're committing treason right in front of our eyes.
Right in front of our eyes, because many people in this country just haven't read these documents, and so they just don't know. Sadly. Okay, well, sticking with a similar theme, I suppose, because what we're really talking about, I think, is Agenda 21. That's really about breaking down constitutions and taking away people's rights. A big part of Agenda 21 would be population control, and today the UN has basically published a new journal in Science, which is basically talking about population control. And it's saying that, oh, hang on a minute, we got the figures. Originally, we said it was going to be 9 billion and it was going to curb from there and it was going to drop. But, actually, hang on, we think it's going to be 11 billion by 2100. And obviously, that's going to cause lots of problems. So, as I said, the new population research was published in the journal Science. I tried to have a look at it. Unfortunately, you have to pay $50 to do that. And I was unable to do that. But it's obviously not been made completely public, so not everyone can read it. The researchers claim to have used never-before-seen advanced statistics to place convincing upper and lower limits on future population growth, so much that it's never been seen before that we still haven't seen it, claiming that there is a 70% chance that the number of people on the planet will rise to 11 billion by 2100. There is, quote, there is now a strong argument that population should return to the top of the international agenda. Population is the driver of just about everything else, and rapid population growth can exacerbate all kinds of challenges. And that comes from Professor Adrian Raftery at the University of Washington, who basically led the research team who compiled this research within the UN. However, the research was so apparently groundbreaking that no one has been able to say how the information was gathered or how the advanced statistics, because you have to make a definition because they're advanced now, have been manipulated. Collected and presented, slip of the tongue. Raftery went on to say that he thought that the reason populations were so high in poorer countries was because of a lack of education in women. That's exactly what I did when I read it. I went, oh, which limits their life choices. Presumably, Raftery was unable to gather advanced statistical data in regards to the living conditions and mortality rates of these poor nations from his advanced comfort at his Washington health office. Without any new material nor any information regarding how the research was conducted, the article, which was a Guardian article, basically just went on to express the usual rhetoric of population control and the struggles that we face in the future with healthcare, poverty, pollution, and high levels of crime. So effectively, we've got an article which is saying that we've got new advanced research which is going to show us how much trouble we're in with population control. But a little bit like climate change, we can't really show you the details. We can't really show you how we've got to our evidence, and you just got to accept it. So really, I don't know, Mike, what you feel about whether we have too many people on the planet. I'm pro people. I actually don't think that we're going to have a population problem. We just need to develop a better system and actually stick to the systems we design, which is a good example of the Constitution. We have a fantastic Constitution, but we just don't. The people who are supposed to be governing it are not adhering to it.
I think that the main reason that we have, if we have a population problem, which I agree with you, I don't think we have, but what we do have is we have largely expanding populations in countries that are absolutely suffering from poverty, that are underdeveloped or undeveloped completely. And the reason for that is because of infant and child mortality and the need for large families in order to generate an income and a living. And of course, all first world countries have demonstrated that once standards of living rise, the rate of population increase falls to the point that, as we are at the moment, where actually the death rate ends up higher than the birth rate. So the answer to this is quite simple. You allow countries to develop. Of course, the climate change agenda doesn't allow countries to develop, because that would increase CO2 levels, they say, and which would cause climate change to accelerate. And so we don't allow sub-Saharan African countries, we don't allow Central and South American countries, we don't allow many Asian countries to develop. And their populations expand and they live in abject poverty and suffering as a result. This is a policy decision that our governments are making, and particularly this government is making. And it's the wrong one. And so perhaps his wonderful new statistics algorithm is demonstrating how he views the future economic prospects of many developing countries rather than what's going to happen to population itself.
I think so. Usual box view, I think. Sticking with the UN and coming back to Ebola. I know we've mentioned that a few times this week, but it is certainly a story that's persisting. According to the UN Council, the Ebola outbreak is now considered a threat to international peace and security. Whether NATO would plan to invade or not, I'm not sure. But it is only the second time that the Security Council has met to discuss a worldwide health emergency, the first being the HIV/AIDS epidemic, which coincidentally has also ravaged Africa. The UN Health Chief, Dr. Margaret Chan, said the deadly and dreaded Ebola virus got ahead of us, and it was time to urgently catch up. Presumably then, the UN will be meeting very soon to discuss the flu virus, which killed an estimated 250,000 to 500,000 people compared to the several thousand people that have died from the Ebola outbreak. The point, obviously, that I'm making is that, whilst, no one wants to see people suffering and no one wants to see people dying, absolutely not. But let's put this into context, like the flu virus is also contagious and it kills hundreds of thousands of people a year. So perhaps there's a little more to the fact that the mainstream media and particularly these organizations like the UN are really bulking this up, perhaps. Ban Ki-moon thanked the US President Barack Obama for sending 3,000 troops to provide expertise in logistics, training and engineering, as well as urging all nations attending the UN General Assembly meeting next week to follow suit. The Security Council has encouraged the governments of Liberia, Sierra Leone and Guinea to accelerate the rapid diagnosis and isolation of suspected Ebola cases and carry out public education campaigns about the virus. The UN resolution addressed the detrimental effect of the isolation of the affected countries' economies and has called for the lifting of travel and border restrictions, a resumption of shipping and air service to the affected countries. So, I don't know about you, but I would have thought that if a country is entrenched with an infection, I would have thought that actually a little bit more border control might have been a little bit more sensible. I would have thought. Perhaps this article is maybe linked with the previous article with population control. I don't know. That could be quite cynical, but I don't really know. And I thought it was interesting that the Americans sent 3,000 troops and not medical aid. That's kind of interesting as well. It's almost in a way of containing the actual outbreak. If I could bring up the next slide. There is this article on Rents.com, which I'd urge people to read, actually, because it's a really interesting read. There are some joining up of dots that are obviously joining up of dots, but that's only because the writer has no other choice because there's such little information coming out. But the article itself is really good, and what she's asking the question of. So how come this Zebov strain of Ebola, which originally was infected Zaire in 1995, disappeared and was all of a sudden resurfaced 20 years later, to affect Guinea? She points out that there were, at the time before the Ebola outbreak, there were nationwide vaccine campaigns, and there was 3 of them in total. And they were trying to encourage people to go and vaccinate. The only trouble is that people didn't want to do that because they strangely suspect that there's a genocide program going on to kill people so that they can...
This is the local people?
This is the local people. They're starting to suspect that, funny enough. And then all of a sudden we had Ebola, which broke out. Now what she's saying is that she suspects, there's not a lot of hard evidence as such yet, but she's suspecting that basically what was happening was a program whereby they were getting people in for the vaccinations. There was a two-stage program. The first time that she suspects that they were actually being infected with Ebola. So the second time they came in, they would then inject them with the vaccination to cure it. The only problem is that some people didn't come back for their repeat jabs, and so the virus was able to actually go past its initial stage and then start infecting other people. It then got out of control, and they tried to quarantine it and failed. Interesting to note that the World Health Organization didn't report this outbreak until 6 weeks after the actual initial outbreak. And also, even more interestingly, is there is no patient A. A patient A would be someone who would be the first person to have infected it. They might have brought it over from Zaire. They might have I don't know. They might have brought it from some other country. But there is no record of the first initial infection, which makes you suspicious, right? It makes me suspicious because if it was a genuine epidemic and you were genuinely trying to control it, then you need to know where it came from so that you can do that. So I think there's a lot of questions to be asked still of the Ebola crisis, and I think people should start reading between the lines a bit more. Next story, please, is staffing crisis forces 3 in 4 hospitals to hire nurses from abroad. So apparently a new trend emerging in the NHS is to spend vast sums of money recruiting nurses from overseas, with more than 3 or 4 hospitals employing foreign nurses. Many hospitals recruit large numbers of nurses, sometimes more than 30 or 40 at a time from countries such as Spain, Portugal, Greece and Italy. What is even more bizarre is that the Nursing and Midwifery Council, which regulates nurses, is forbidden from testing those coming from abroad as their capability to be a nurse, as that would infringe on their freedom of movement. And where do you think that came from, Mike?
Sorry, you can't check whether somebody's qualified to be a nurse in this country because that would infringe their freedom of movement.
Their freedom of movement, yeah, and that's thanks to the European Union.
Does that apply to doctors as well?
I don't know. I was only looking at the Midwifery Council and nurses, but yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? But we can test the British nurses, and if they're not up to scratch, we can get rid of them.
Yes.
But foreign nurses, we can't do that because that infringes their rights. It is claimed that trusts are resorting to overseas because there are not enough British-trained applicants. However, in the same breath, it is admitted that the nurses from abroad are not trained and do not speak English, as is echoed by Lord Winston, who has warned that the nurses were trained in a different way and had few skills in dealing with patients. So
what was the reason that they were doing that? What did you say there? Was the reason they were bringing people over?
Because there's not enough applicants.
Not enough applicants, right? So it's nothing to do with the fact that these trusts are utterly bankrupt and the fact they're in deficit this year for the first time.
It's got nothing to do with that. It's got nothing to do with that. And the fact that we have like 70,000 people apply for one Costa Coffee job, right? But we've got no one applying for nurses. That's not real. That's nothing to just go back. Just don't worry about it.
Okay.
So yeah, I think what we're looking at really is we're looking a bit more further into the destruction of the NHS by making it spend more money needlessly, because of course it's going to cost you more money to bring nurses over than it is to train our own nurses, and I think pushing out of the skilled labour and privatisation of the NHS.
So they're going to go on strike.
So they're going to go on strike, understandably. So this is coming from Unison, who is the largest health union in the UK. And they have agreed that there is going to be a strike due to the low wages that are paid to 70% of nurses. The NHS pay review body suggested last year that NHS staff should receive a 1% pay rise. However, Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt decided that only some staff should receive it, because those already getting an incremental pay rise were already getting a boost to their pay according to length of service or experience. Unison's General Secretary Dave Prentice responded to Hunt's decision with, quote, "This government's treatment of NHS workers has angered them, and this anger has now turned into action. Refusing to pay them and even a paltry 1% shows that the government really thinks about its health workers. Inflation has continued to rise since 2011, and the value of NHS pay has fallen by around 12%. To date, the Secretary of State has refused to meet with any union to discuss the issue of pay, which has led to the first, or may well lead to the first strike in 32 years. And I would just say, well, are they refusing to pay nurses because they know that soon the NHS is going to be dissolved and it's going to be completely taken over, or are they trying to push NHS nurses out?
They don't have any money.
Well, they don't have any money, but the effect that's then having on the workers, is that not going to cause?
The government is not giving them any money.
Right, okay.
So the government isn't giving them any money. They can't pay the nurses. This is they're building up this angst and this problem in order to push through the privatisation agenda.
Sure, but a lot of nurses are going to leave, don't you think, due to the fact they're undervalued basically. And that hole is going to be filled by something.
I think you've just answered the question about why they're recruiting from overseas, because that's why people...
Well, I had hoped the article was going to go the other way, but yeah.
But in the meantime, we're going to make sure our kids are fatter.
Fatter as well, but I think there's something a little bit more to the selling off of school playing fields. But I'll just quickly run through the synopsis of the article. It's basically the Labour-run council of Swansea is considering selling off large amounts of land from school playing fields in a bid to raise half of the £73 million programme to upgrade school buildings. 4 schools have already had land sold off, and it is believed that another 14 are in developers' sites. British councils across the land have been cashing in on the sale of children's playgrounds, with some 10,000 playing fields being sold off between 1979 and 1997. That number greatly reduced in the following years, but now councils are returning to pick off what is left, or what they call surplus. Michael Gove, the recently deposed Education Secretary, greatly weakened the provisions for the minimum outdoor space required for outdoor sports, and also dropped the requirements that all school children should take part in 2 hours of sport a week. There is cause to be concerned that the recent surge in academies will see even more land sold off, as they will face even less checks. And as you say, Mike, obviously we're leading to we've got more obese children, and this certainly isn't helping. But I actually wonder if it's becoming a little bit more sinister, because so I went home a couple of weeks back, and from my old bedroom at home when I used to live with my parents a long time ago, overlooks the playground, playing fields. And I remember being as a child, there would always be like about 15, 20 of us up there playing football and blah blah blah. So that playing field is still there, but it's empty, right? So where are the kids? And I would suggest that they're at home playing computer games.
Oh, they are?
Right? Well, I think this has got more to do with their with this agenda of getting people into computers and ready for what is called the singularity in 2045, where we'll all be uploaded onto computers and so forth. I really think that this is about getting children getting away from doing old recreational things and getting them onto computers.
Yes, because that closes their minds.
It closes their minds, but it also means that we have a society growing up that is just so addicted and so fixated on computers and relies so much on it that getting them to make that shift between organic, like normal, living, breathing creatures into this transhumanistic world of subhuman stroke robotics, I think this is part and parcel of that.
Of course, the fact that our children are all sitting at home killing each other on computer games is why they need relationship lessons.
Yeah, absolutely. Good link. I like that segue. That's a good one. So yeah, relationship lessons. This is Yvette Cooper, who has spoken publicly on the need for children to have compulsory relationship lessons following the Rotherham sex abuse scandal. The Shadow Home Secretary suggested that the lessons should be included to help change attitudes, although there was no mention as to what they should change their attitude to or from. Talking about the culture which allowed the abuse in Rotherham to happen, she said, quote, "It's much wider. That's why it has to be about attitudes and sex and relationship, education going right the way up through school." Quite sinister. That kind of sends shivers down my spine. I would say the same thing with the whole change thing. We're not saying what we're changing from or what we're changing to. We're just saying that we need change, and we've got to administer that through schools and the educational programs. Obviously, there's the whole thing of taking the parent role. I mean, surely children learn how to develop relationships through their parents initially, and then through their siblings and through the wider social networks that they have. Like, pretty much I'm sure that's the best way to learn how to build relationships. But the thing that interests me is that, so we have the Rotherham sex abuse, right, scandal where adults, right, not children, but adults were abusing children. But we're going to change the attitudes and relationships of children. Not the adults that were, not the scores of adults that allowed this to happen, or even worse, were actually part and parcel of it. No. We're not going to change their attitudes or relationships. We're going to change the attitudes of children. You
can't turn a society into a paedophilic society unless you do that.
Well, indeed, you have to. Right the way up through the educational system, she says. So presumably there's going to be lessons all the way through on how to deal with relationships with adults, which is pretty scary.
Yes. Yes, so that's about relationships with adults. Well, what about relationships with God?
Oh, you're getting good, man. You're getting good. You're getting good. I like it. So I just wanted to throw this in. This is actually an article from yesterday, and for people who remember me being on the show quite a few months back and stuff like that, obviously this is the Archbishop of Canterbury is a particular needle under my skin. So he's basically talking about the fact that he thinks he may be doubting whether God exists. Right. Now, this is a personal question for everybody, personal subject for everybody, and whether people believe or not believe is totally up to them, right? But surely the Archbishop of Canterbury doesn't have a choice, yeah?
You'd think it was part of the job description.
It's kind of part of the job description, right? If you don't believe in God, you shouldn't be Archbishop of Canterbury. I mean, I don't mean to be kind of like straight and narrow down there, but I think it's kind of like you say, it's a requisite of the job, right? And I just wanted to remind people about this gentleman who used to work in the oil industry and was, in fact, if you look into his history, was in fact caught up in the Nigerian scandal, which happened in the 90s. Even though he claims that he wasn't, but there are lots of people that say he was. But that's not the only interesting thing about this guy. This is the guy who obviously spoke out against Wonga and the payday loans, only to find out, oh dear, the church invests in Wonga. Oh, didn't realise that. Oh, but wait, we're actually going to become a payday loans firm ourselves, and we're going to charge usury, which is completely against biblical teaching. Right, nice one, Archbishop. Of course, the guy supports gay marriage. Again, totally everyone's opinion. It's totally up to them what people's opinions are. But again, the Archbishop of Canterbury shouldn't really have an opinion on this because it's pretty much laid out in Leviticus what God thinks of that. So, and he supports the female clergy. Again, same thing. Should really read the Bible that he's supposed to be protecting. Well, and of course he's got some interesting family ties. Let's just leave it at that.
So you don't have any strong views on this then?
I have very mild views on this, yeah. I'm not actually Christian myself, but I do find it's really, because when you
it's the hypocrisy, I presume?
It's the hypocrisy, but it's when you read the Constitution, right? The Constitution is underpinned by the Christian faith, right? And I think that to fully destroy what this country is, you have to destroy what's left of its faith. Now, you go back 150 years or 100 years, maybe the faith was a bit stronger in this country, and they've done a good job over the last century. And again, it is a personal issue. I think the whole idea of God and sort of ideas like that are totally personal for everybody, and that's totally fine. But I do think that when people head an institution, they really should stick to the principles of the institution, unless the people themselves want to change it.
I think that ultimately, at the end of the day, this article is about the attack on the Constitution.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that when you move away, it doesn't matter what your religious beliefs are or whether you believe in God or not. But if you move away from the principle of a higher power in the universe, then all that you're left with is the principle that humanity is the highest power in the universe. And if humanity is the highest power in the universe, then it's the people in the top 1% of the population pyramid that become the highest power in the universe, and they can do what they like, right? So our Constitution is, as you say, based on the Christian faith. No matter what you think of that, it is based on the principle that we have inalienable God-given rights, that nobody can take those rights away from us because they're God-given. If you remove God out of the equation, then people can take whatever they like away from you, and that is the principle of human rights legislation. And it's the danger of this kind of humanist, secular humanist agenda in politics. This is completely separate from what you may believe, as this is I'm talking about from a political point of view here, not from a spiritual point of view.
Yeah.
So that's my view on this.
It's an interesting point as well, is that we live in a much more atheistic society than we did a century ago, and our supposed quote unquote leaders are atheistic. And we look at the world that we're living in, where quite a lot of people are getting royally screwed over. I'm not saying that people weren't like before, but it's just interesting that in a godless world we have quite a heinous and unethical, immoral system that is sort of growing out of that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And perhaps expressed by the financial system above all others. So here we've got the European financial system continues to collapse, and they're heading towards more quantitative easing. And why is that? Because they issued a round of cheap 4-year loans to banks. It was issued by the European Central Bank, and basically nobody took them up on the offer. Well, not very many banks did anyway. So the intention was that, well, let's put it this way: the markets were going to view any take up of these loans of less than 100 billion euros as being a disappointing event. So only 80 billion euros was taken up, and so it looks like they're going to head towards more helicopter dumping of money for no purpose other than to bail out the banks. And just to clarify the position here, anybody that thinks that quantitative easing, which is dumping of money for no particular purpose on the financial system just to bail them out, is the same as the principle of the Bradbury pound, which is national credit, which is used for productive purposes. And as the BRICS countries are demonstrating, it's using money in that way for productive infrastructure purposes or for productive purposes gets you out of the financial crisis. Doesn't necessarily save the banks because they need to be split up and their debt dealt with. But it will get the physical economy out of the mess that it's in. That's the main difference between QE and the Bradbury pound. Lots of people seem to think that there is no difference between those. But yes, European Central Bank heading for another dumping of euros on the world. Really, that'll do a lot of good.
That'll help.
This little article, sort of throwaway little article, but I just thought I would include it because I just find it incredible. HMRC is going to provide technical assistance to the Pakistan Tax Authority. The Pakistanis need to increase their tax revenues, and they're turning to HMRC to do that. And I just thought, bearing in mind the complete mess of revenue and customs that Lynn Homer has made, maybe we should just ship Lynn Homer over to Pakistan and get sort our own problems out over here. Leave her to it, and maybe the Pakistanis know what to do with people like that better than we do.
Actually, they do.
But anyway. Moving on, of course, the bad news is that France is the whipping boy that's been sent out to put a new layer of depleted uranium over Iraq. So France began its airstrikes today, and according to this article, will continue more airstrikes in the coming days. So Britain and America at this point don't have the political support to do it, and so they're sending the French out to do it instead. Well, that's good. And then just to end the day on a pretty shocking note, really. Guy Taylor was pushing this around Twitter earlier on, so thanks for that, because it's pretty shocking. I suggest everybody goes and has a look at this article in the New Zealand Herald. We aren't quite at the stage of police in riot gear turning up to remove children from homes in this country, but if it's happening in Australia, it's probably not that far away from happening here either as well. So clearly, many countries in the world at the moment, particularly countries that have come out of Britain in some way or other, suffering from the same type of ridiculous social services type operations, and that I think I do suggest people have a read at that article.
So sorry, the New Zealand Herald. So presumably that's happening in New Zealand.
No, it was happening in Australia. It was just the New Zealand Herald covered the story. Right. So that's it for today. Tonight at 6 p.m. we've got Doomwatch. For the first hour is Scott Tips, and for the second hour it's unfortunately me. Unfortunately for you, but it's me anyway. For the second hour, so that should be a bit of fun. And of course, let's not forget the conference, first and second, two conferences, 1st and 2nd November in the Ramada, Birmingham, Sutton Coldfield. Do have a look at the Doomwatch.biz website and buy your tickets, and I hope to see you there. Yeah. And thanks very much for joining us. And Brian and I will be back on Monday. You're back in next Friday.
I'm back next Friday.
And in fact, you're doing Doomwatch next Friday. I
am doing Doomwatch next Friday. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. We'll be covering the topic of registration. And a few other little things.
Yes, super duper.
Bits and pieces. Thank you for the technician as well for changing the lower third. I think it's the first time in like 5 shows that I've actually got my name up. Cheers, guys.
Okay. See you Monday.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye bye.